Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen-Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a Millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 3, Saturday Night Live or Saturday Night Dead? Hey, I'm Chris McBrien, along with Yancy Eaton. This is Pop Goes Your World, a pop culture podcast for the generations. Before we get started, hey, we got a big topic this week. We're going to be talking about an institution, both in television and pop culture in general. That's Saturday Night Live. We're going to be going over our favorite SNL sketches, our favorite performers from the show and stuff like that. But before we get started, Yancy, I want to ask you something. You were born in 1988, am I correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so I'm curious. When did you first start watching SNL? Because for me, I was watching it when I was as young as 10. I was 10 years old. I used to stay up late Saturday nights and I used to watch it. So when did you first kind of get into it?
I remember being a kid, and I have 3 other siblings. On Saturday nights, my dad was a local stock car racer. So he and my mom would always be gone Saturday nights, and they would go to the races, and they'd be gone all night. They'd come back, super, super late. And so once my oldest sister was basically old enough to take care of and kind of babysit all of us kids, we would watch movies and TV and stuff like that. So Saturday Night Live was one of the few things that was on late that was worth watching at all. I mean, you know this, Saturday night, late night Saturday television is, for the most part, it's just complete trash. It's there's nothing good on it at all because everybody's out doing things and stuff. So they're not going to put prime programming on Saturday night. So it was the only thing that was on TV. And so I'd say from the time I was about, like you said, maybe 10 or 12 is when I first started watching Saturday Night Live. And I'm not going to lie, I've had an on and off again relationship with it. Sometimes, I'll go 6 months and having watched every single episode and not, or every, single iteration of it and not missing any. And then I'll kind of have a falling out with it. And, whenever you have a character or an actor or actress that's on the show that you've really taken to and they leave, it's painful. And it's, It takes a lot for me to come back to it, but I'd say about 10 or 12 years old was when I first started listening to it, and it's a complicated relationship right now.
Yeah, well, definitely. Like one thing with this show is it's had such an interesting sort of history. Like with the ups and downs, it's almost been like this big roller coaster ride. Like it started off so amazing, and we'll get into some of that tonight. And then it really took a nosedive right around 1980 when the original cast kind of all went away, and Lorne Michaels was gone and all that kind of stuff. So it's just been up and down, up and down, up and down all the way. That's for sure. But especially like recently, I think generally the consensus out there is that Saturday Night Live is not as good now as it used to be. And we're going to go through some things tonight. Like I say, we're going to get in, when we get into Top of the Pops, I want to take a look at, I want to ask you what your top 5 sketches are from Saturday Night Live. And I'm also going to ask you about your top 5 SNL performers. So you want to get started on that right away?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's get into it. You kids today with your Zima soft drinks, Pac-Man video games, and your Dan Fogelberg records.
We're the do-it-yourself generation.
A lot of millennials look at me like I've got 2 heads.
If you didn't like MASH...
So here's where our generations are really, really different.
They all watch the same 5 TV shows.
We mock what we don't understand.
It is very, very culturally relevant. It's going to be here for a while.
It's like a little secret handshake that we have with each other.
Help me out, Chris. What am I trying to say?
I'm young, I'm hip, and I speak the language of the streets.
You have like this weird, almost cultish obsession with the Fonz.
Okay, so let's start with the top 5 SNL sketches from your, it could be, I guess, pretty much from your generation. It's probably where you're going to do it. But I tell you what, how about if we do it in reverse order? We go 5 to 1. And I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to you go 5 to 1 and then I go 5 to 1? Or you want to go your 5 and then my 5 and your 4, my 4? How do you want to do that?
We can swap it 1 for 1.
Okay, well, let's do that. So why don't you get us started?
Okay.
Your number 5 sketch on SNL of all time, what is it and why?
Okay, just as an aside, I understand that there are going to be some sketches that maybe should be on the list that aren't making it. It's really, really hard to rank 5.
It's impossible. We could literally do this show 10 times. We could do 10 more of this show, and we could still be pulling up sketches and stuff like that. So, to narrow it down to 5. I know I'm asking a lot. It's hard to do, but give it your best shot, that's for sure.
All right, so I was going for something that had not only did I think it was really funny, but it also had kind of a like this sustaining cultural relevance. Like if I seen it in my Twitter timeline, if I seen my mom posting something about it on Facebook, that type of, overarching like cultural relevance for like 2 or 3 days afterwards, that's what I was thinking of. So number 5 for me is is the day everybody figured out that Beyonce was black. I don't know if you've seen it.
That's a pretty good one.
But this was right around her Super Bowl performance, the halftime performance, and this is at the affront of the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and police brutality, and the racial divide and civil rights and stuff. And of course, she goes and she does her halftime performance, and a lot of people didn't really take to it very well. Some people did, and that's fine. But the just the idea that they didn't realize ahead of time that she was actually a black woman. Like, this is the first time. It was kind of a play on, unknowing white people, but also like poking fun at the fact that, for her entire career, Beyonce has been like incredibly averse to conflict. She's never pushed social agendas. She's never, taken a stand and used her platform to, basically better the plight of African Americans. And, so I like jokes like that work both ways. It's making fun of everybody that's involved in it. So that's my number 5.
Oh, I really like that one a lot. Now, I should say, just to sort of peel back the curtain a little bit on the show, you and I have not discussed our list in any way, shape, or form coming into this. We're just kind of flying blind on this. So right. I think that it's kind of interesting because my number 5 is, okay, so I think for me, SNL has always been at its best when it's kind of being edgy and addressing social issues. And I'm going to go with you. I'm also going to go with a racially sort of charged sketch that they did. And it's from December 1975. Richard Pryor was the guest host. And him and Chevy Chase did a sketch together, and it was called Word Association. Okay? And so you
I have not seen it.
Okay, yeah, you're going to have to go and look it up and find it on YouTube or something like that. So they do a sketch together where Pryor, he's being interviewed for a job by Chevy Chase. And during the interview, Chevy Chase, he asked Pryor to play a word association game with him. And it starts out pretty innocent, like Chase says dog, and Pryor, of course, he actually says tree. But they go back and forth, and they say words, and then things kind of start to kind of go downhill. And Chase starts throwing out sort of increasingly offensive racial slurs, and Pryor reacts with his own racial slurs back at Chase. And so then finally Chase uses like this one really, really bad term, and Pryor reacts by calling him honky. And then Chase uses the N-word, and Chase uses the N-word, and Pryor says dead honky. So Chase offers him the job, and it was really, really funny. And it was just, and the thing was too, like, so just
it's edgy.
Oh, it was, and especially for 75. And actually it was kind of an interesting sketch because to me it actually played up a little bit of racial harmony, if that even makes any sense at all in the sketch, because it was edgy and stuff like that, but I don't know, it had some sort of a gelling, component to it. It's kind of hard for me to word that, but the thing was too is that show was one of the best shows ever. I went back recently and I watched some of these older shows, and like if you take a show like that, like when Richard Pryor was on, every single sketch on that show is 100 times better than any of the best sketches that are being done today. Like that show, if you take a look at it, it was also the debut of Belushi's Samurai. He did this Samurai Hotel with Richard Pryor. It was the first time Gilda Radner did Emily Lytella on Weekend Update, and they did this Exorcist sketch where Richard Pryor was one of the priests, and the girls in the bed, played by Lorraine Newman, is playing the Linda Blair character, and the bed levitates off the floor, and so the priests are all chanting, "The bed must be on the floor! The bed must be on the floor!" And the bed drops, and Pryor goes, "The bed is on my foot." And it was just like, it was just all around. It was funny. And Richard Pryor was such an amazing host, and such a hard host, I think, for the show, because he was really notorious for his substance abuse. And he was a lot of times was late for movie sets. Like, he was, funny enough, Blazing Saddles, one of my favorite comedies of all time, he was actually originally pegged to play the role of the sheriff in that movie. And they finally decided not to do it because he was so unreliable, like with his substance abuse and things like that. Right. And then on Saturday Night Live, like Lorne Michaels insisted that Richard Pryor was going to come on the show. And NBC didn't want him because he had already caused some problems on some other television programs on other networks and NBC as well. So they're like, we don't want him, right? And then it came down to this whole thing. But I mean, Pryor came on. Pryor insisted that he get to pick the musical guest that night. He wanted Jill Scott Heron to be on. And NBC was so scared of Pryor using the F word on the air, that they insisted on using a 5-second delay on the show so that they could beep anything out if he said it. And Lorne Michaels actually agreed to do it, but he knew, you know, Richard Pryor would like freak out if he knew, so they didn't tell Richard Pryor. And you know what they did? They synchronized all the studio clocks in the studio so that he wouldn't know that there was a delay.
Really?
Yeah, and Richard Pryor said in his memoirs, if he'd have known at the time that they did this delay on him, he never would have went on stage and done the show. So that's just kind of how volatile the show was back then and how edgy it was. But yeah, anyway, long story short, for number 5 for me is word association. What's your number 4?
Okay, I just want to say I obviously have a huge gap with that. I was doing a little bit of research for this, just trying to look up clips and stuff like that and refresh my memory and maybe, you know, uncover something that I haven't watched before. And I guess Saturday Night Live is, well, you know, NBC obviously is notorious for keeping their content off of any other website, even YouTube. Like if somebody else wants to upload a clip or anything like that, it is nearly impossible to find some of this stuff.
Now, that's a good point. I wasn't 100% sure if it was NBC that's keeping it off or maybe it's Broadway Video. You know, right. but either one, you're totally right. It was tough, really, really tough to find any good clips out there. But I think if you do a search, you're able to find a couple. I was able to find some of word association. I watched it and just laughed all over again and just realized just how brilliant it was. But anyway, so you're number 4.
So my number 4, again, I'm coming from a much smaller pool of just the amount of time that I've watched it. Obviously, like I wasn't around for, you know, the Eddie Murphy days and stuff like that and getting to see Richard Pryor and stuff. So I'm going on a very recent curve right here. But number 4 for me, I watched it today again with my wife, and it's The Kissing Family. It's with Andy Samberg and Fred Armisen's in it and Kristen Wiig, of course. And it's basically like where this Andy Samberg has his boyfriend, I forget what the other actor's name is, but they're coming to meet his family. They're a gay couple. And the family is just super, just overtly, unbelievably affectionate, like kissing everybody, you know, 5-6 times. And then it just keeps escalating. And at first it starts as like semi-uncomfortable because you see like a mother, you know, giving her son like a kiss on the lips once, and then she does it again and again and again, and you kind of feel like this like really uncomfortable kind of like tinge on the back of your neck because it's weird, you know what I mean? Like if you've ever seen like your friend like kisses, you know, your adult friend kisses mom, you know, I still kiss my mother, but it's just it's weird. But to build on like that weird kind of like weirdish taboo, and it keeps going and going and going till eventually like they're all literally mouthing each other and sucking on each other's necks, and it's just I just like skits that give you that weird feeling, you know what I mean? It attacks something in you that you know it's weird, and even if it's stupid and you know it's just a skit, but like it has such a cringeworthy effect to it that you literally cannot stop watching it. So that's number 4 for me.
Okay, I'm going to go with one. Okay, so a little bit of history of the show. Back at the beginning of the 80s, like 1980, in the beginning of the decade, SNL was in a lot of trouble, okay, because the original cast was gone, and like I said, Lorne Michaels had left the show, and there was a pretty weak cast. There was Charles Rocket, Gilbert Gottfried, Denny Dillon, even Julia Louis-Dreyfus. I don't know if you knew, she got her start on SNL. And,
I did not.
But it wasn't until they let this young, cocky writer for the show named Eddie Murphy come on, and he did a bit on Weekend Update about basketball. And it was like at that moment, like the show all of a sudden had a breakout star. The audience loved him like right away. And SNL, it finally looked like it might be able to turn a corner and like kind of move into a new era. And I tell you what, Eddie Murphy, man, he did some amazing sketches. Like he did one called White Like Me, where he made himself like a white person, went out and found out like white people get all this free stuff and all this in the world. And his buckwheat was awesome, especially, it was called America Mourns. It was a little bit where buckwheat got shot and all this. But for me, my number 4, I'm going to go with an Eddie Murphy sketch that he did. It's called James Brown Hot Tub Party. And it's one of my favorites one of my favorites of all time on the show. And it was just like so full of energy. And it was just this short little sketch where James Brown was like doing this show from his hot tub, and Eddie Murphy just nailed him like exactly, like his voice, you know, the incoherent screams, you know, the jump back, why too hot, and all that. And it was just so funny. Eddie Murphy, I think, one of the best cast members ever. And for me, he was never better than when he was doing imitations. And I thought the James Brown one was hilarious. So that's my number 4.
Okay. All right. This is where it gets really tricky because of the obvious generational overlaps and stuff like that. Like you might claim a skit as your generation's, I might claim it as mine. So there's a lot of back and forth that makes it really, really difficult. But I think for number 3, I'm going to go with the Celebrity Jeopardy rather.
Yeah.
Any of them. Literally any of them. I know they did a couple, and then obviously Will Ferrell left and he came back and he did it. I know for the 40th anniversary they did another they did another skit with it, but any of the Suck It Trebek or I'm trying to think of like specific words that they use. Just his blatant mispronunciations of words. It's the stupidest, but it is the funniest skit. I love really intellectual, like next level, crazy stuff that really makes you think. You're like, wow, that's really intelligent. Maybe that went over the heads of a lot of people, but I got that, and that's really interesting. I love that comedy. But I also love really obvious, stupid, punny, just like, just completely over the top comedy like this. Like this sketch, I know everybody has seen it. You guys all know what it is. I could watch it 100 times and it never gets old for me.
So I have a question for you. So for you, who was your favorite like celebrity panelist on the show? Because I had one of my favorite. Like I have my favorite. I'm wondering what was yours.
Like
Sean Connery, or who was it?
Sean Connery was really good. Wasn't Norm on one?
Yeah. So my favorite was when Norm did Burt Reynolds. His Burt Reynolds was He had the mustache and he was chewing the gum, and he would be like, "Yeah, okay, I'm gonna take Swords for $100," and he's like, "Yeah, it's S words." It's S words for 100. It's like, oh yeah, okay. Well, I'll take for 200. I'll take the rapists, and then it's like, that's therapists for 200.
Yeah.
Like it was just,
it's stupid, but it's so funny. I love stuff like that. Seriously, okay, absolutely love it.
So for my number 3, I'm going to push the limits a little bit of my generation. It's sort of kind of right at the tail end of it. But when Chris Farley did his Matt Foley motivational speaker, like it was amazing.
Is this the Down by the River?
Yeah, he's like this 35-year-old overweight divorced guy who he lived in a van down by the river, and he's giving motivational speeches, and he does it to these teenagers. That the parents bring him in to talk to these teenagers to try and set them straight, and the teenagers clearly like see through it all, and then he just goes and just crashes through the coffee table. Like I still laugh when I'm thinking about it. I loved it. It's number 3 for me.
I love Chris Farley. He's one of those characters though. It's like knowing now that obviously he passed away and stuff, and knowing all the problems that he had with, like you were mentioning with Richard Pryor, with substance abuse and stuff like that, and just how just dark his personal life was. Like I love watching those clips, but it's also at times it's really, really painful because like how it ended basically.
Right. Like
that was a man that was dealing with a lot of internal demons and stuff, but unbelievably funny. What number are we on?
I guess number 2.
Number 2, my number 2 is it's called Thanksgiving Miracle. I don't know if you've seen it. This is a relatively new one. Did you see this sketch?
Oh, I don't think I'm familiar with it.
So it has a bunch of cast members, and it's they're sitting down at the table for Thanksgiving dinner, and it starts out real nice. It's like, we have lots to be thankful for, and the one character's like, well, I'm just thankful I didn't burn the turkey that much, and everybody's ha ha ha, fake laughing or whatever, and then right off the bat, somebody comments, well, I'm just thankful that our governor doesn't let any of them nasty, refugees into my home state. And then it instantly just keeps snowballing and snowballing. Like there's Jay Farrow is there. He's an African-American actor or whatever. And all of a sudden they're like, hey, how about you keep your friends from, attacking the police and maybe we won't have a problem. So it goes from instantly like this picturesque, just like your perfect idea of what a Thanksgiving dinner is supposed to be like, and then it completely flips it, upside down, and they're all fighting about all these social issues and everything, right? And it's getting really, really heated, and everybody's just throwing stuff and racial epithets and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, the little daughter there, she puts on a CD, and it's Adele singing Hello. Okay. And it basically is talking about like the one thing that like everybody can all agree on is like Adele is your jam. And so all of the fighting completely stops. Everybody is like transfixed on this song, and everybody's literally singing Adele. It sounds stupid. It's not like this like crazy like punchline or like a really clever one-liner. But literally, if you've listened to Adele, I don't know if you're a fan or not. I listen to Adele. If it's on in their car, like I'm singing Adele. My mom will sing it. My brother will sing it. It's like cheesy adult contemporary pop music, but like, my God, if you cannot resist singing it, it's a fantastic clip. If you've seen it, you'll relate to it. It's a really, really good time.
Awesome. Okay, so my number 2, I'm going way back again. That's the way I am. Super Bassomatic 76. So that was the name of this little sketch. I tell you, nobody did like crazy rapid fire talk like Dan Aykroyd Nobody. And he was probably never better at doing it than when he used to make fun of late night TV pitchmen. I think it was like Ron Popeil he was poking fun at. But he did a short, like 30-second bit about a kitchen appliance that you use to liquefy bass. And of course, it was just a blender. It was a blender with a sticker on it, right? And he's talking a mile a minute, you know, and then you're going to take the bass. And he would actually, then he took a bass and he put it in the blender and turned it on and he chopped it all up into this like red liquid mess. And then it just, the whole sketch just goes into like gross out mode. Lorraine Newman is there drinking it. That's great bass. And it was just like off the charts. So I got to go with Super Bass-O-Matic 76. So up to number 1.
All right. Number 1 is The Shooting with Andy Samberg. Have you seen it?
I don't think so.
Nope. All right. The Shooting, it starts out with there's 2 characters in like an apartment or something. And he's like, "Hey man, how was your day?" He's like, "Oh, you know, it was okay. You know, I actually started writing a letter to my sister," and he's starting to explain it. And then all of a sudden you see you hear a gunshot rather, and you look, and the other character is literally just pointing a gun, like a smoking gun, and he shoots him. And the song "What'd You Say?" You know, the "Ooh, what'd you say?" It starts playing over and over again, and it keeps building up to where he gets shot. And then you think he's going to die. It does like the slow-mo, him falling to the ground and staring with his eyes like transfixed, like the dead eyes in the camera. And you think it's over. And the next thing you know, the song plays again. And he's pointing the gun this time. The other character has now shot him back. This goes on 2 or 3 times, the exchanges of them shooting each other. Other people are then brought into the scene. Everybody keeps shooting everybody. At the very end of the clip, you see 2 detectives walk in. They read this note that this guy was writing that the whole scene is basically based on. And he says, "You know what? I think this is what's going to happen. This is a note to my sister. I think I'm going to shoot him. Then he's going to shoot me. Then somebody else is going to come into the room. And then we're both going to shoot them. And then 2 cops are going to come in and they're going to shoot each other." And then Fred Armisen's character is reading and he's like, "Isn't this ridiculous?" And then bam, all of a sudden the other detective shoots him. And then it's this insane build up, Chris. It's the thing has got millions and millions of hits on YouTube. A lot of people have seen it. The music, the way they cut the actual clip itself, it's so perfect. It's so funny because it's the best jokes are ones that just keep building and building and building. And it is the perfect clip, dude. I've probably watched it 100 times. I'm not going to lie. It's absolutely perfect. It's called The Shooting.
Very cool. I will definitely go and take a look at that. It kind of just reminds me of, there was a sketch going back to Farley. I remember, like, anyone that's ever done theater out there, you know, sometimes you end up working with an actor who just tries to upstage a little bit, you know, like he's just a little bit too loud, or, you know, stands upstage, you know, just a little bit to try and pull you to look toward him and all that kind of stuff. And I remember Chris Farley was doing this one, and they were doing this play, and he was trying to upstage everybody, and he was like overacting the whole, and the rest of the cast was getting so mad, and then he had to get shot, and then he died, and he was like, "I've just been shot, oh my god," and everyone's like, "Oh come on, you're just supposed to die," and he took like 10 minutes to die, just overacting the whole thing. I don't know why it just came to my mind. Okay, so my number 1 sketch of all time, this is probably, most people are gonna be like, "What the heck are you talking about?" It's called the Wolverines sketch. And I'll tell you what, okay, so it might not be like the best sketch ever. It was kind of weird and morbid. Michael O'Donoghue is totally like that. So again, it might not be the best sketch, but I tell you what, it was the very first. And so for that reason, I got to mention it here. That's the Wolverine sketch. For starters, it had a cold opening. So what I mean by that is, like, it didn't have any titles, it didn't have any music. It just started. The show just opened up, and it was Michael O'Donoghue and John Belushi sitting there, and John Belushi's kind of got this spaced out like look on his face, and they're doing like this foreign language teaching session where O'Donoghue is getting Belushi to repeat phrases back to him, and it starts out with, he says, "I would like," and Belushi says, "I would like to feed your fingertips to the Wolverines." To the Wolverines. And that's where the sketch gets its name from. And so what he does is O'Donoghue keeps getting Belushi to repeat stuff back to him, and then finally O'Donoghue has a heart attack and stands up, and Belushi mimics him, like grabbing his heart, falling down to the floor. Like I said, it was kind of weird and morbid, but it was like groundbreaking. And the thing is, it was the very first sketch ever done on the show. It was the cold opening, and it was something that would last for 40 years. And most importantly, it gave people a reason to stay home on Saturday nights. So for me, that's why I'm going to go with the very first sketch ever, and that's a Wolverine sketch. Tell you what, getting it down to 5, pretty much impossible. Like you said at the top, we could probably do like, 10 or 20 of these shows. Like there were so many sketches. Like if I think it back, like Olympia Diner and like I said, White Like Me, like I mentioned, and Men Synchronized Swimming was another point, counterpoint. And the thing is, a lot of these didn't just end up being great sketches. They ended up creating catchphrases that have become like staples in pop culture. Like cheeseburger, cheeseburger, cheeseburger from Point Counterpoint, Jane, you ignorant slut, and all. Like there were just so many of them that it just, it's unbelievable. But I'm sure we'll have to do another SNL show at some point. But now what I'd like to do is take a look at the top 5 performers from your generation. So again, we'll go in reverse order, and you can certainly go first. So start at number 5. Who would you say is your number 5 performer on SNL of all time?
Man, this was also very, very tough. Number 5, I'm gonna go with Tina Fey. I love Tina. She's absolutely incredible, super, super funny. A lot of her skits are fantastic, but that's not what you remember her for. I think everybody, when they think of Tina Fey and her stint on SNL, it's for the Weekend Update. That was absolutely amazing. It was the one thing where I would make sure that I watched that. If I didn't watch the show at all, I would make sure to watch the Weekend Update. Just incredibly funny, incredibly just unbelievably witty. I just absolutely love it. So she's my number 5.
There you go. Okay, number 5 for me is Bill Murray. Guy was incredible. And the thing was, he was the first addition to the cast. So he was like the new guy. He came along in 1977. And he was so funny. He looked like this stoner kind of dropout loafer kind of guy.
He still does.
Oh, I know. And the thing was, he was really raw when he first joined the show. But man, is he something to watch. And I think part of the appeal with him was always that the audience really connected with him, because it was just like he was almost like a regular guy that like snuck up on stage and joined the cast. And to me, that was kind of the spirit of the whole show. Like when it first got started, it kind of felt like the studio exec, the adults, went home for the night and a bunch of rowdy kids snuck in and took over the studio and did a show. And I think for me, Murray kind of embodied that the most. So for that reason, he's number 5 on my list. Who's your 4?
Nice. Number 4 is Bill Hader.
Nice.
I love Bill Hader. Most of his characters, the James Carville, the Herb Welch, doing like the old reporters. He played old guys, young guys, dads. He played women. He played little girls. Played everything like that. But my favorite character for him, obviously, is Stefan. Like the oh my god, like the weird wearing like I can't even explain it, but he's number 4 for me. He was just so versatile. He's still so funny. I love him.
My 4 is Gilda Radner. I don't even know where to start with her. She was like this lovable, like almost frail woman, but whose personality was like huge. And when I think in terms of personality, she was probably one of the best performers in the history of the show. And her characters, like she had Rosanna Dana, and Emily Lytell, they were just genius characters. And they were the type of characters that the audience just went crazy for. They just adored her. And it was funny, she never really found success in the movies after she left the show, but her legacy definitely lives on with the Gilda's clubs that, we find right around the world. So she's my number 4. Your number 3?
Number 3, this was really, really difficult because I there's so many that I want to jam in or at least give like an honorable mention to, but I obviously I can't. But number 3 for me is Andy Samberg. A lot of people don't realize this, but over 100 of his digital shorts that he made have over 1 million views on YouTube. Over 100. And you want to talk about some of the like most iconic, just incredible like parodies of like pop culture and just what he did with music and how funny it is and how he was able to incorporate celebrities and bring celebrities who are normally very, very controlling of their image and how they put music out and portray themselves. Like he would have rappers who their image is of being hard and street, having street cred and stuff like that, and make them look completely ridiculous, and somehow always got them on board with it. Some of the funniest videos I've ever seen in my entire life are like, I'm on a boat, or I just had sex. Like it's fantastic. You can literally kill an entire day just listening to it. So Andy Samberg is my number 3. 3
for me, I'm going to go with Eddie Murphy. What can you say about him? He's this huge star. He became one of the biggest movie stars of all time. And if you liked his stand-up comedy, and I don't know if you've ever gone back and seen, Delirious or Raw or anything like that, but if you like that stuff, like one of the things is he was like completely spot on with his impersonations. Mm-hmm. You've definitely got to go back and watch his work on SNL, like whether it was like he did the Gumby Christmas or Stevie Wonder or Buckwheat. The guy was crazy talented.
I've definitely seen Buckwheat.
Yeah, like probably the most popular performer in the history of the show. So he's number 3 for me. Who's your 2?
My number 2, man, this was really tough. Kristen Wiig. absolutely beloved. I don't know if you remember the send off that they gave her. They basically gave her like a queen's farewell. Basically, she was so huge for the show, and that's what I referenced earlier in the show about whenever a character leaves, like it really sticks with you. Her leaving was absolutely devastating to me because there was just so many characters of her that I absolutely loved, and most notably probably her being the Target employee. We're gonna go to Target. That character for me is my favorite. But it's good to see her having all this success now because she's just absolutely phenomenal. So she's number 2 for me, Kristen Wiig.
Okay, number 2 for me, I'm gonna go with Dan Aykroyd. The thing that made him so good was that he did stuff that no one else did and that no one else has ever been able to do, like the technical jargon, the biker attitude. He could do like super serious, like when he was on Point Counterpoint, or he could do complete lowbrow physical stuff, like he did the refrigerator repairman, which, by the way, was so he played this refrigerator repairman who comes in and like bends over and you can see the crack of his butt, and like they're laughing at him, the kids are laughing, and I remember reading about it in dress rehearsal. He wanted to stick a pencil in the crack of his butt, and the NBC censors said, no way, you're not doing that. There's no way you're doing that on the air. So he said, okay, no problem, I won't. Of course, he went out and he did it on the air, and he stuck the pencil in the crack of his butt. He was just an amazing writer, an amazing performer, and best of all, he was Canadian. And one of the cool little stories about Dan Aykroyd,
best of all,
oh yeah, one of the cool things about him was that he never actually was officially going down to audition for the show. He jumped on his motorcycle, he brought Gilda Radner on the back of his motorcycle and drove from Toronto to New York so Gilda Radner could audition for the show. She was the very first cast member that was ever hired for the show, by the way, just as a piece of trivia. But he drove her down, and he was just in the waiting room, and somebody came out and said, hey, dude, you're coming in to audition? And he's like, no, I'm not here to audition. And they said, well, just come on in and audition. So he did. Well, thank God, because it changed the history of the show. So Dan Aykroyd's number 2. Number 1.
My number 1 is Fred Armisen. I love Portlandia, the IFC comedy, whatever. It's completely separate from SNL, but I just have like this long love affair with Fred Armisen. He's, if not the longest, one of the longest tenured actors to ever be on Saturday Night Live. I think it was something like 11 or 12 years, like a solid 11 or 12 years. Oftentimes you'd see with cast members, they would leave and they would come back for a season or whatever, but this was solid for over a decade. He was just a staple. Everybody knew him. Even if you didn't necessarily know his name, if you seen him in a movie or something like that, you knew, oh, that's the SNL guy. Incredibly versatile. Some of my favorite pieces he ever did was actually the recent one where he did Prince. I just thought he absolutely nailed it. It was amazing. And like him playing like Liberace or playing female characters especially. It's just, he's so versatile and he's so funny. So Fred Armisen is my number 1.
Yeah, it's interesting, and definitely not a slag on Fred Armisen. Don't take this way, but just when you mention sort of the longevity on the show, I wonder, though, how much longevity on SNL has to do with popularity or how much it has to do with your talent.
Or outside opportunity.
Or outside opportunity and not coming their way. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they can take the grind. I mean, doing that show is incredibly tough. You go in Monday, you got to start banging out some sketches, some ideas. You're in the writer's room. You're starting to go Tuesday, boom. You're starting to write. You're starting to rehearse. You're starting to go. All of a sudden, you got dress rehearsal. Like, everything's just going at a fever pitch, and you're just going like crazy. You're doing rewrites at the last minute. Sometimes you'll notice in sketches, they're looking off to the side. They're reading off cue cards. It's not because they didn't memorize their lines. It's because they were still changing lines like seconds before they go to air. Like, it's a crazy fevered pitch show to be a part of, and not everybody can do it. Some people burn out. Some people just like, I can't do this anymore. So guys that have been there forever, like Armisen, like Kevin Neal and guys like them, I think maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that they kind of fit into that groove, and they can kind of go at that pace longer too. Something to think about. But anyway, number 1 for me, no question, absolute, hands down, the greatest performer in the history of SNL was John Belushi. I don't think anyone personified the show better than Belushi did. He was edgy. He's like this rock and roll star with like this bigger than life personality. He had a bigger than life talent. Unfortunately for the world, he had a bigger than life appetite for drugs that ended his life at 31. He was
31 when he passed away.
31 years old in 1981. Yeah.
Wow.
And him and Aykroyd were like the first sort of breakout stars of the show. They did Blues Brothers together. And who knows how different pop culture would look if he hadn't died in 81, because Spies Like Us and Ghostbusters, 2 of the biggest comedy movies of the 80s and maybe of all time, they were both actually written for him to star in along with And he died, so they had to delay the shows and they had to recast them. And He was the first big star of the show. He'll always be the best star of the show that ever was, that ever will be. John Belushi was the best. That's what I say. So I guess, like you said, tough to come up with the top 5 on both of things. Is SNL better now? Was it better then? What do you think? Like, I mean, it's maybe tough for you because you haven't gone back and watched a lot of that. And I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't watched a lot of the new stuff either. The stuff that I've watched, I haven't really liked that much. Maybe because I'm tainted. Maybe because I watched all the old stuff and it's so good that I don't really give it much of a chance. And maybe I should give it more of a chance. But, when I look back on some of the old stuff, like, oh my God, it was groundbreaking. And like I said, I went back a little while ago and I watched an episode from '78. It was Carrie Fisher was on. And much like the prior show, every single sketch on that show was 100 times better than anything I've seen in the last 10, 15 years. So It was just something else. Anyway, well, what do you say that we have a little bit of
fun with Yancy?
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so this week I'm going to quiz you on SNL related questions. We're going to stay true to the topic, of course, and especially in regard to Gen X, okay? So I'll tell you what, I'm going to start you with a very, very easy one. It's a 50-50 shot at this one, okay? So it's Saturday Night Live. So when a show goes out live, anything can happen. Has the F word ever been said on the show and made it to air?
I know this. Once. It was an accident. I even knew who oh my God, I know this. It was once. Who was the actor? Yes, the answer is yes. It was one time. And I did know this, and I've completely blanked on who the actor was. But it was a mistake. Like, it was a misstep. He didn't actually mean to say it. Like, he jumbled his words or something like that, and he blurted out the F word. Right?
So actually, the F word has been said several times on SNL. The first time was with Paul Schaefer when he said it instead of the word flogging. He was supposed to say flogging and he didn't. Most famously was in 1981 Charles Rocket. So they were doing a spoof of Who Shot JR. And at the end, he looked at the camera and he said, I'd just like to know who the did it. And he didn't mean to say it. He said he just came out, and man, did he get in trouble for that. But I mean, Prince used the F word in a song. Morris Day in the time, sang it in a song. Aerosmith did it as well. But most recently in 2009, Jenny Slate, she accidentally said the F word, on the show. So it's been said quite a few times, actually. But the most famous, I think, was Charles Rocket when he did it in the Who Shot JR sketch. That's for sure. Okay, so next one. In the original cast, okay, Chevy Chase, he opened up this recurring sketch every week with the following phrase. He would say, "Good evening. I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not." Name the name the recurring sketch.
I don't know, but I want to know. What is it?
Weekend Update.
As soon as you said that, that obviously makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. He opened up Weekend Update with that. So okay, so we'll try another one. So this well-known and beloved comedian was offered the chance to join the cast of SNL for the 1981-82 season, but he turned it down so that he could stay on SCTV. Name him.
1981?
Yep. Think about it. He's offered to come on Saturday Night Live, and he says, no, I don't want to do it. I'm going to stay on SCTV.
Here's showing my age a little bit, but what was SCTV? Can you give me that?
Are you kidding me?
Oh my God.
Come on, man.
You and I are doing an entire show on SCTV. Okay, it's a Canadian show. It stands for Second City Television. It was as good or better than Saturday Night Live. No word of a lie. Go back and look up some things. I'm going to send you after the show. I'm going to send you a link to some of my favorite SCTV stuff. Unlike SNL, you can find some of this stuff on YouTube, and some of it will just blow you away. It is so incredible. So this guy was on SCTV. SNL tried to woo him over. He's Canadian, and he died in 1994. Those are some hints for you.
Okay, I don't know if he was actually Canadian, but is it Mitch Hedberg?
No, it's not Mitch Hedberg. It's John Candy.
Oh, yeah. See, I would have never gotten that.
Okay, well then try. I'll expand it a little bit. Okay,
so rest in peace, though, John.
Absolutely, one of the greatest. So in the history of SNL, there's been 9 cast members who were Canadian. I got to give a Canadian spin on this because I'm from the Great White North myself, right? So here's what I want you to do: 9 Canadian cast members in the history of the show. Name 2 of them.
Oh, wow. Nobody knows any Canadians, Chris.
Are you kidding me?
Come on. Okay, I'll make it easy for it. Name one. Name one Canadian that's ever been a cast member in SNL.
Now, when you say cast member, that is a distinction between like being a guest or hosting it, right?
Yeah, a cast member. I'm looking for one of the cast members. One of the not ready for primetime players, okay?
I don't know, Chris. I can't think of a single one.
Mike Myers?
Yep, okay. That actually does make sense, yeah.
Dan Aykroyd?
Dan Aykroyd's Canadian?
Yep. Robin Duke, Norm Macdonald, Peter Aykroyd, Paul Schaefer, Phil Hartman, Mark McKinney, and of course, Martin Short. All Canadians on the show. Okay.
Did not know that.
Okay, well, speaking of guest hosts, you mentioned guest hosts, so I'll put this spin on it for you. So, there's been lots of people that have hosted the show more than one time. Okay, do you know who holds the record for hosting the show the most times?
The most?
Yep, hosted Saturday Night Live more than anybody else, 16 times.
Well, recently it seems like every other week it's Justin Timberlake. That's not right, is it? No. Who has hosted it the most? Can you give me any kind of hint as to...
You've already been buzzed, so unfortunately I gotta take it away.
Okay.
It's Alec Baldwin. Has hosted the show 16 times. Yeah, Steve Martin's hosted 15, John Goodman and Buck Henry both 10, but Alec Baldwin is the leader at 16. Okay, so I'm gonna make it even easier. I'm gonna go into the world of movies for you. Okay, so sometimes they make movies based on SNL sketches, right? There's been 11 movies that have been based on SNL sketches or characters. What I want you to do, though, is name the very, very first one. What was the first movie ever based on an SNL sketch or character?
Was this the Blues Brothers?
Oh, ladies and
gentlemen.
Very good. Very good. Came out in 1980, and they didn't make another one for 12 years till Wayne's World came out. So good for you.
One of my dad's favorite movies.
All right. Well, it's one of my favorite movies as well. So, okay, one last one to go, okay? One last one on the show. So when the show debuted in 1975, the show was not originally called Saturday Night Live. Can you give me the original name of the show?
Wow. I've got to give you credit, Chris. You did give questions that, even if you didn't watch the show, you could probably pick stuff up just through osmosis, just hearing it in passing and stuff.
That was the point. Yeah, I didn't want to like stump you. I want to have some fun. It's fun with Yancy, not stump Yancy.
Yeah, this is really difficult. You could tell it's coming out through your questions that this is something you're obviously very passionate about, that you followed for a long time.
Absolutely,
it's seeping through. This is your joint right now.
Oh,
but
love it to death.
Yeah, but no, I don't know. You're gonna have to tell me.
It debuted on October the 11th, 1975, and for over a year it was called NBC's Saturday Night. And the reason why is, at the time there was a show on Saturday night called Saturday Night Live with Howard Cosell. And so they couldn't call it Saturday Night Live, so they called it NBC's Saturday Night. And then they ended up just changing it to Saturday Night. And then they finally changed it to Saturday Night Live. If you notice on the cold opening, at the end of the cold opening on every show, what do they say right before they kick it to the credits? Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Yeah.
And they've kept that right from the beginning, because that's the way they started it at the beginning of the show, and they've just kept it through ever since. You know,
it's wild.
Like I said, we could probably do 10 shows on SNL, and we'll probably come back and do some more in the future. That's for sure. But for now, I tell you what, it's time to call it a wrap. We've gone a little bit long. Yancy, no question for me, SNL stands as one of the best TV shows of all time. It's certainly the most seminal TV show of all time. It was really good to get your take on it. So I tell you what, until next time, this is Chris McBrien for Yancy Eaton saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at @CMcBrien or at Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.